Welcome back. This is Stocks to Watch, and during this precious metal renaissance, we are exploring Vortex Metals, a discovery-driven company with copper and gold assets trading on the TSX.V under VMS, the FSC under DM8, and the OTCQB under VMSSF. This interview is disseminated on behalf of Vortex Metals, and we're privileged to be joined by Michael Williams, co-founder and executive chair. First and foremost, welcome, sir.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, and such a pleasure getting you on. And just diving into this, Michael, you've kind of positioned Vortex at what many analysts are calling kind of an inflection point for the copper demand. Can you kind of walk us through your conviction around the timing of this copper cycle? Maybe specifically, how do you kind of see 2026 to 2030? Because there's a lot of discussion around like supply deficit scenarios, kind of creating value for the company at your stage versus maybe some of the majors who can't move as quickly.
You know, I've always felt that we were heading into a copper market. A lot of us have in the industry. You know, the problem is we've been saying this for a long time now, at least, 5-6 years. You could see the fundamentals. And, I always maintain that copper is really China. As China goes, copper goes. They're still importing over 50% of all copper globally. But now what you're seeing is there's certainly some infrastructure spending going on in the United States. And, hopefully Europe gets their act together. But largely, it's been a good run for copper. I think if you look at the supply demand equation, we've always been pointing to over $5 copper. It's here. Does that mean it won't go down? No, but what it does, it's starting to form a new base. I can tell you this: I've been looking for good copper assets for years now. Can you even go post when I made the discovery at Underworld, which was gold in the Yukon, but it's hard finding good copper assets in countries that you don't lose any sleep on when you go to bed at night. So that's kind of where I see the market. I've been talking with a lot of producers. You mentioned them earlier, and they always used to say, short and medium term, copper could be a little bit soft, but going forward, they see a strong demand. Well, that was years ago. We're now in that medium to long-term phase. And I think the copper fundamentals are strong. And when you couple that with, everyone's talking energy transition, net zero, AI, those things don't take place really without copper and some of the other metals for that matter. But, copper is always the main one we discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to some of your assets there, I mean, Chile is a century-long mining tradition and established legal frameworks, but it's also become more complex. Some investors argue juniors can actually move faster and build better community relationships than some of the majors in this environment. I mean, do you see jurisdictional advantages at your scale, compared to some of the largers out there? And how does being small and nimble in Chile actually work to your favor?
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
If you're looking for assets in Chile, sometime, historically, Chile was two state-run companies. That was Chilean Copper. Then some of the big producers started to get involved. But it historically hasn't been a place that you would think of like you do with Canada or the United States for juniors. That's changed over the last, call it 10 years. But I think it's a good question because one of the things that's changed in Latin America, and I'm sure it has in Africa, is you need more direct relationships with the local people. It's not all done out of the capital cities anymore like it used to be. When we go into an area like Chile, we would basically be dealing with the federal politicians in Lima. As you advance the project, it would even intensify. There would be a little bit on the local side, but now you've really got to get the local people on side. And the primary reason is for permitting, because without the local people on side, it's very difficult to permit these larger projects. So a smaller company like ours can come in and establish those relationships really quickly. And hopefully we do. But I must say, in a lot of the cases of the producers, they've known this for years too, and their community relations people have reached out. Where we have a bit of an advantage over those guys, if we see something we like, we can move quickly.
Yeah, and the proximity to Rio 27 mine is obviously strategic. I mean, can you quantify the economic advantages this provides? And what would it cost to develop a greenfield project with similar grades versus what you can potentially achieve?
Well, where we're located in Illapel, which is about 3 hours off the highway from Santiago, so it's not directly up north, but it's in an area that it looks like there's a big copper producer just to the north of us going to go into production, and at Illapel, it's a manto style, which where our property is located. When you've made one discovery, it's easier to make several more because you know the way the structures are going. So fortunately, we've been underground there and looked at their operation, and they're the people that we've done a deal with. They're the vendor, and one of their key owners is Paul First, is also now a director of ourselves. He's also a director of Banco de Chile. So that sort of gives you a bit of a quantum on the quality of people they had associated with them. But it allows us, it makes our exploration easier. There's infrastructure in the area. They have a mill up and running. Now, it's a mill that fits the size of their deposit. If we find what we think we would have to expand on that or build our own, just given the scope. But it's sort of like a 100-meter race, and you're starting on the 20. So it helps you dramatically.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind speaking to your expertise just a little bit here. I mean, you led Underworld Resources to a $138 million sale to Kinross. What lessons from that exit are you directly applying to Vortex, and is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, Underworld was 2010, 2011. What I liked about that, we put $28 million into the ground and sold it, like you said, for close to $140 million within 24 months. Now, that was a different market, different time, and it was gold, where we're looking here at copper gold, which I think is equally as attractive where we are in the market. But that was one of those magic discoveries where I discovered on a green fields. And when I say it was with three partners, and they were very good geologists. And technically, that's sort of how I build these companies. I find good technical partners and bring them in, and then get them the money they need to advance the project. But I don't know if you'll get a project that you can make a discovery within 24 months. And it started the largest land rush in Canadian history. So from that point of view, those are tough to duplicate. But we've got a couple projects which excited me in Vortex that I think could rival or maybe even outdo the success we had there. They're located in Oaxaca, Mexico, and they came through a really good geologist, my former business partner here, David Jones, who was very well known, unfortunately passed away. But, David was renowned for making discoveries. These projects we have in Oaxaca, Riqueza Marina is the one that I really like, and Zaachila, which we'll be getting ready to drill. I think they have the potential to be an Underworld on a grander scale, just given the scope we see. And so that's what I like. There's nothing like making a discovery in this industry. It's it's almost euphoric, and especially when you can keep advancing it and you have something of scope there. The challenge in Mexico, Kyle, has been permitting. It's been very difficult. I see it getting better now. And we're working with several groups that I believe will allow us to have a drill on the ground there next year. And if it wasn't as good of a project as we see, I wouldn't have gone this long to try permit it. But I think the risk reward is definitely worth it.
Yeah, appreciate the insight, and hopefully Mexico's getting a little bit more lenient as well with Plan Mexico and kind of leaning more into internal discoveries. But I wouldn't mind shifting a bit to your team. I mean, you have Dr. John Larson, who spent decades at BHP running Latin American exploration. How did you attract someone of that caliber to Vortex? And beyond Larson, who else is on the technical bench, and what kind of gives you the confidence this team can execute?
Well, what I generally find in our industry is on the technical side, the good geologists and engineers, they tend to know one another. And David Jones, the person that put the technical side, was friends with John Larson, Dr. Larson. So he was able to attract a good group of technical people, and John being one of them. And then we've, Paul First, we added to the board. We're about to add a very high profile to our advisory board. So I always say first class people hire first class, second class hire fifth. So I always have made it my business plan to get the smartest technical people I can. And I think we've done that again. John's put our own team together. We have a really good local geologist, a Peruvian fellow that actually lives in Santiago. It's been in the industry a long time, but you really need those strong guys on the ground, and John tends to oversee it. So, yeah, it's all about the guys that can figure out these projects. It's not easy, and you need the John Larsons of the world to help you.
Yeah, again, appreciate the insight. And I wouldn't mind kind of getting the broad view of what your expectations are. As most investors, we're looking 5 to 10 years out. It'd be kind of interesting to get your idea on where you guys see yourselves being. I mean, we're talking about a mid-tier copper producer, a portfolio of operating mines, something else entirely?
I would say my forte has always been taking assets like this from this stage, like I did at Aftermath Silver, where I'm also a founder. When Aftermath had a market cap similar, if not less, to where we are with Vortex, and it's now trading at 400 million or close to it, depending on where our stock is. But I would like to do something similar for Vortex. So I think what it requires is us. It's always easier for me to promote or talk about a stock that's had drill results or some geological success. Once it's met with that, then I have this big network that's had a lot of success with me. I can put them in position them in the stock, or they want to come in. So I think we're just on the cusp of being able to do something with Vortex. So the plan is in Chile at our Illapel, want to do some geophysical work, identify those drill targets, and then later on this year get a drill in. And I think, and it's probably the way it should be. Drills are what move companies. And I want to get it to that point, where we can certainly, every time we're doing drilling, it's accretive. And I think we're heading to there. I like the property. I always have. Last drill program, we saw some indications that we're getting closer to potential mineralization. We need to follow up on that, on the mantos. And there also could be a potential IOCG that we need to do further work there. So I want to demonstrate to the market that we have something substantive, and then, I'll put my foot on the gas.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of encapsulating this conversation here, what are the main reasons that investors should invest in Vortex Metals today rather than later?
Well, look, I think, I know every company says it, well, we're undervalued. I think you have to look where we're trading versus what's in the portfolio. So you've got the Illapel, which is a very strong asset. You're close to a operating mine, and you're drilling now along strike. You're just looking for the cross-cutting structures that hopefully would host another deposit. So you've got something already there. You just need us to go out and add to it. And when I say add to it, from the existing mine, let's find 2 or 3 more of them. They tend to form like that. And we've got the opportunity to find the engine of those manto deposits, the IOCG. But I think you've really got something special in Mexico that's worth holding on for. So something that can take you overnight to the bell of the ball if you get your drill holes in there and you hit what we think is there. If it's not, then you move on to other assets. But those Mexican projects don't fall from trees. They're very difficult to find. If you had a similar project in the United States or in Canada, it would have been discovered 150 years ago, because a lot of the mineralization is showing up at surface. So those ones have all been drilled. It was just opened up in the last 10 years in Mexico. So you now have an opportunity that you wouldn't have seen in Canada for the last, as I mentioned, 100 years. So I like it from that point of view. There's the potential for a home run.
No, great to hear, Michael. I appreciate your time today. As we pass it off to the viewers, as always, we'd love to know what you think in that comment section below. Consider subscribing as news and catalysts come down the wire. Of course, we'll bring it to you here. And if you'd like to explore Vortex Metals any further, we'll leave the links in the description below as well. But on that, we look forward to catching you in the next one.
Thanks, Cal.